There's a way to purify dirty river water using two pieces of metal most people would normally throw away. No electricity. No filter cartridge, no expensive purification system. Just copper and zinc touching each other inside water. Within seconds, a reaction begins. Invisible ions start moving. Microorganisms begin to die. Contaminants start attaching themselves to metal surfaces. And slowly, the water becomes cleaner than what flows from many modern taps. What makes this even stranger is that this discovery is not new. It's more than 4,000 years old. Ancient civilizations across the world already knew it. Egyptians used it. Greek sailors relied on it. Romans even built it into parts of their infrastructure. Yet somehow, in the age of billion-dollar filtration companies, this ancient technique almost disappeared. And the most shocking part? The method requires almost nothing. No machines. No power source. No replacement filters. Just two simple materials, copper and zinc. When these two metals touch each other inside water, something remarkable happens. A natural electrochemical reaction begins. Tiny electrical currents start to form. Copper releases microscopic ions into the water while zinc begins to sacrifice electrons. Together, they create a hostile environment for harmful microbes. Bacteria struggle to survive. Cell membranes rupture. Enzyme systems collapse. And slowly, the water begins purifying itself all from two pieces of metal. No batteries, no chemicals, no plastic cartridges, no maintenance cycles, just a natural reaction. A system that can last years, and it can be built for less than $10. Which raises a strange question. If something this simple works, why doesn't everyone know about it? Thousands of years ago, long before modern chemistry existed, ancient civilizations noticed something unusual about copper. Water stored in copper containers stayed fresh much longer. Archaeologists discovered that ancient Egyptians, more than 4,400 years ago, stored drinking water in copper vessels. Hieroglyphic records even describe copper as a purifier. But Egypt was not alone. Across the Mediterranean, Greek sailors carried copper containers during long sea voyages because water stored inside them resisted spoilage. Later, the Roman Empire expanded this idea even further. Romans built parts of their water infrastructure using copper piping, noticing that copper systems reduced contamination in their water supply. On another continent entirely, the Aztecs used copper mixtures to maintain clean water reservoirs. Meanwhile, in India, ancient traditions recommended storing drinking water overnight in copper pots, a practice still followed in many households today. Even in ancient China, copper was used in vessels designed to preserve liquids. Different continents, different cultures, different centuries. Yet they all discovered the same strange property: water stored with copper stayed safer. For centuries, these practices quietly continued. Then modern science began to investigate. In the late 20th century, researchers started studying something called the oligodynamic effect, the phenomenon where certain metals like copper and silver destroy microorganisms even in extremely small amounts. One famous experiment came from researchers at the University of Southampton. Scientists stored contaminated drinking water inside copper containers for 16 hours, and the results shocked them. Bacterial contamination dropped by 97.7%, nearly eliminated without chemicals or filtration systems. But the story becomes even more fascinating when zinc enters the equation. When copper and zinc touch each other in water, they form something known as a galvanic cell, essentially a tiny natural battery. Zinc begins losing electrons. Copper receives them. This movement of electrons creates a small electrical current that accelerates the release of antimicrobial copper ions, making the system even more powerful and extremely cheap, which might explain why it rarely appears in modern consumer filtration systems. Today, the global water filtration industry is worth more than $35 billion. Companies sell systems that require constant replacement cartridges every few months. Filters wear out. Cartridges expire. Customers must buy replacements again and again. But a copper-zinc system? It can last years, sometimes up to 6 years before replacement, an uncomfortable reality for companies built around recurring filter sales. Evidence of copper's purifying properties continued appearing throughout history. Phoenician traders used copper containers to transport water across long sea routes. In medieval Europe, Communities sometimes dropped copper coins into wells to slow bacterial growth. Even today in rural regions across Asia and Africa, storing water in copper pots remains common practice. These cultures didn't understand electrochemistry or copper ions, but they observed the results. Water lasted longer and people became less sick. So what exactly happens inside the water? The answer lies in chemistry. When copper sits in water, it releases microscopic copper ions, written as Cu². These ions attack bacterial cells in several destructive ways. They weaken the cell membrane, disrupt enzyme systems, and damage the organism's genetic material, preventing reproduction. Within minutes to hours, many microorganisms simply cannot survive. Add zinc to the equation and the process becomes even stronger. Zinc gives away electrons while copper receives them, creating a galvanic reaction that generates a tiny electrical current in the water. That current accelerates ion release and increases antimicrobial activity. Essentially, the system becomes a self-powered microbial killer, no electricity required. Now compare this with modern consumer filters. A typical household carbon filter costs between $20 and $80 per cartridge and must be replaced every 2 to 6 months. Over 5 years, a household might spend $400 to $600 on filter replacements. A simple copper-zinc setup costs about $10 and can last for years. Even the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency recognizes copper's antimicrobial power. In 2008, the EPA registered 275 antimicrobial copper alloys, capable of killing harmful bacteria. Scientific journals have confirmed similar results. Research published in the Journal of Health, Population and Nutrition found that storing water in copper vessels significantly reduced harmful microorganisms. Hospitals have even experimented with copper surfaces to reduce infection spread. And NASA explored related ion-based purification systems during early space missions. In other words, even space agencies rely on the same fundamental principle ancient civilizations discovered thousands of years ago: metal ions can kill microbes. So why don't we see copper-zinc purification everywhere today? The answer may lie in economics. Simple solutions don't generate recurring revenue. Modern filtration companies rely on replacement cycles. Buy the filter, replace the cartridge, repeat forever. But if a system works for 6 years with almost no maintenance, there's very little left to sell afterward. Interestingly, this ancient technique is surprisingly easy to recreate. Take a small piece of copper wire and a strip of zinc metal, twist them together so they stay in contact, and place them into a container of water. After removing visible sediment with cloth filtration, leave the water undisturbed for 4 to 16 hours. During this time, the copper-zinc reaction releases ions that neutralize microbes. For additional purification, the water can pass through charcoal filtration, which absorbs chemical impurities and odors. This creates a simple 2-stage purification system. First, copper and zinc reduce bacteria, then charcoal absorbs chemicals. And when you look back through history, the pattern becomes impossible to ignore. Ancient Egyptians stored water in copper vessels. Greek sailors used copper containers. Romans built copper piping. Aztecs used copper mixtures. Hindu traditions preserved water in copper pots. Chinese cultures used copper vessels. Phoenician traders transported water in copper containers. Medieval Europeans dropped copper coins into wells. Different continents. Different languages. Different civilizations. Yet all discovering the same strange property. Copper protects water. Somewhere along the timeline of human progress, this knowledge faded into the background, replaced by complex machines, industrial filters, and billion-dollar purification systems. Yet the ancient secret never truly disappeared. It remained hidden in archaeological records, traditional practices, and the periodic table itself. Copper, zinc, two simple metals working together through the invisible forces of chemistry. A forgotten technique from thousands of years ago, one that ancient civilizations trusted long before modern science understood why. And sometimes the future of technology isn't about inventing something new. Sometimes it's about remembering what the world once knew.